What are you smoking today? Because I have something really different and good and new, and I'm excited to share.
Okay, let's do an intro first.
Okay.
And then
It's witchcraft.
Hey, it's 4:20 a.m. Hi, and welcome to the Stoned Witches Hour, episode 28.
Holy shit, 28? We've been here a while.
Can you believe it? It's been like almost 8 months now. We started in January of this year. And here we are, Laylla and Chelle, two best friends, one of us on the East Coast, one of us on the West Coast, sharing spooky stories.
Both of us high.
Both of us really, really high, sharing spooky stories, trying to see who has the creepiest, craziest, most out there, scary story.
I always do.
Oh, no. It's always me.
East Coast rules, man.
The West Coast is the scariest. And today is no exception. Today, I'm going to be talking about a haunted mine in Alaska.
Ooh.
Pretty scary.
I didn't know there were haunted mines in Alaska.
This is the largest copper mine in the entire world at the time. And it is very, very haunted. And there's also a related true crime.
Ooh. Interesting. Well, I'm going to one-up you like I always do, because here on the East Coast, and actually we're kind of teetering our threshold line. We always had divided from episode 1. We kind of made the Mississippi our guiding divider here.
That's right.
So Laylla is west of the Mississippi. I'm east of the Mississippi. So I'm kind of riding the line here, and we're going to take it down to Tennessee, to a place that I know you've heard of. You might not know.
Graceland?
No, Dollywood.
Even better. I like Dolly way better than Elvis, but
right. We're gonna go take a chat to Adams, Tennessee, which is actually kind of where my mother spends her winters.
Scary enough,
right on the Kentucky border, to the Bell Witch Cave.
The Bell Witch.
Hell yeah!
Yes. I've heard of the Bell Witch. I'm so excited.
So I am very intrigued about the Alaskan cave. Absolutely.
I'm intrigued about the Bell Witch Cave.
I just want you to know that yeah, we're going there today.
This is going to be an excellent episode. So buckle up, witches, grab your weed, grab your teddy bear, make sure you've got at least a couple lights on, sit down, sit back, and get ready to be spooked.
I think tonight they're going to have to actually potentially grab a loved one to hold on to as well.
Yeah, don't listen alone. I wouldn't listen to this episode alone.
And if you're driving while you listen to this, because I know we have a couple people who listen to this while they're driving, hold on to the steering wheel tight, because we don't want you to veer off the road out of total scaredness. I say that because I know my boyfriend listens while he drives. So stay on the road, babe. About to scare ya.
It's about to be spooky. Yes. So I'm Laylla, representing the West Coast. And tonight, like I said, I'll be taking you to Alaska. And
I'm Chelle, and I'm high, and I'm taking you to Tennessee.
I love it.
So what are you smoking today? That's the important part. Who cares where we're going? What are you smoking?
I've gone back to the cousin, I guess, of a favorite. A few episodes ago, I went on and on about Bacchio Gelato, which I still adore.
Gelato. Yeah.
Oh, so good. And I haven't been able to find it again. Still looking for seeds. If you know any, thestonedwitcheshour@gmail.com. Hook a witch up. Anyway, so I did find, however, from one of my favorite delivery places, gelato number 41, and it is related to Bacchio Gelato, and it looks like it. It's pretty dark green, just like the Bacchio Gelato. And when you break into it, it's got that gorgeous purple loveliness, and it tastes very sweet, up high, really happy, really chatty. Good stuff. About a 29% THC, Chelle. So I know that you'd like that.
Right up my alley.
Right up there. And it tastes delicious, which you know I love. So it's the perfect strain for talking, for doing podcasting, for getting shit done and for being happy about it. Anything in the gelato family seems to make me very happy. I'm just uplifted, upbeat, and happy. I love it.
So you'd call this a functional?
I would. It's not like the Bacchio Gelato where I was like, really, really high after just a few hits. This, I would say, is a little more functional. I mean, it is 29%, which is on the higher end, but it's not into your 30s. So it's not slapping me right in the face. It's just giving me that. I get the grins, you can start to feel your cheeks turn up and you start talking a little more. Yeah, this is definitely not a sit down and get like a focused work done. This is more of get a podcasting or getting a social type work done.
I gotcha.
How about you, Chelle? What are you smoking today?
So, this stuff, I can't even. So it's called, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. I've never heard of it before. And I always like trying new things, especially if they're high THC. Jelly Belly.
Never heard of it. I've heard of Jelly Bellies. Doctor Who introduced me to Jelly Bellies back in the day, but I've never had a Jelly Belly cannabis.
This is a sativa, but I will say upbeat, relatively motivated. I could lay down and take a nap, or I could sit here and podcast half the day, either way. But again, sativas and indicas can sometimes hit people differently.
Yeah, as we've discussed before, having 2 classifications or 3, if you go with hybrid, really doesn't cover the full spectrum and honestly isn't scientifically accurate when they look into the genetics of the plant. So I don't know, take your sativa or your indica with a little grain of salt.
Pretty much. I just kind of go with how I feel.
Yeah, that's why it's so good to talk to great bud tenders. And you've had excellent luck with bud tenders. Did you get any advice about this before you bought it?
I did not. I actually got this at a shop downtown that I normally don't go to. It was one of those running low, walking around town. Hey,
they're right there.
Yeah. So it's not generally a store that I frequent a lot. So I didn't make a huge purchase because I didn't, you never want to.
Right. You don't want to go in blind and now you've bought an ounce and you're out however much money.
Right. And
how much was this, by the way?
This was back to the traditional 60 and 8th.
Yep. Same with the gelato 41. That's a lot.
Which I feel is highway robbery, but whatever.
Agreed.
But it is a 29.7. Good high, good taste. It almost tastes like, as much as they call it Jelly Belly, it reminds me of like 7-Up or Sprite. Kind of got that like lemony, limey tang.
Oh, I like that. It almost sounds like we're both in that sweets and dreams category of the cannabis cup, correlations.
But this is another one of those, and I've talked about this before, that I really do feel it's a better smoke and it's just all around just a better whatever experience ground. This isn't the consistency that you want to just stuff and shove.
Yeah. Even a famous stuff and shover, sometimes these really heavily resonated nugs really should be ground up and fluffier, or you're just not going to get a nice burn out of it.
Well, not only are they like that, but they're also super compact. Like they've grown compact as well. Because the first little bud I did that with, and first of all, it felt like I took 8 years to smoke that little bud, which is not actually as good as you'd think because you don't want to keep getting that ash hit on every hit through half your pipe. But it just didn't smoke good as a bud, but ground up, rock star stuff.
I worry sometimes about really, really dense buds because of something called PGR.
And what, pray tell, is PGR? Sounds like MSG.
It's a hormone. It's a synthetic hormone. It stands for plant growth regulators. And sometimes people will use this on cannabis as they're growing. And basically what these hormones do is they help plants to not branch as much. It gives you better fruit production or bud production. And it helps to increase density of buds and make them kind of bigger, thicker, and denser. And so sometimes I haven't seen any, but people say that there's one way to tell PGR weed or cannabis that has had this growth hormone used on it is if they seem to be excessively dense.
Now, is that like harmful or something?
Yes, you should be told when you're buying weed if any pesticides were used on it or any type of growth hormone or growth regulator. Some people get nausea and vomiting or will have breathing issues after smoking weed that has been treated with PGR.
No shit.
So what to look out for with PGR weed is you're going to find pot that has it doesn't smell a lot. You won't get a lot of that green smell or your typical weed smell. It'll have little to no smell.
Right.
It'll be unusually dense, very thick, very dense. They'll feel almost like squishy, like spongy, and won't have as much trichomes maybe as you're used to seeing.
So has that been happening a lot lately? Is that like a new thing?
I think so. I think as people are trying to find that picture perfect weed, because I've shown you weed that I've grown and that other fellow growers have grown, and it sometimes will be, we don't trim it up as nice, we leave a lot of the sugar leaves. It looks shaggier. Sometimes it'll look fluffier. It won't be quite as dense. Depending on the cultivar, it will be as dense, but people who grow to sell want it to look pretty. They want people to look at it and buy it. And your average buyer isn't going to know that shaggy weed is probably sun-grown, full of crystals and absolutely fabulous. They want that typical
pretty stuff,
big, thick, fat buds that they can show off on Reddit or Instagram. And that's not what you're always going to get. But with PGR, you get that every single time. So some growers, unscrupulous growers, will use this growth hormone to make weed that doesn't look good, look fabulous, even though it's not going to get you as high.
Well, I'm gonna keep an eye on that because, I don't know how many episodes back now, but we could probably go back at least 2 or 3 or 4 episodes where I've commented that I've had these buds that you really just have to grind up to smoke.
That might not necessarily mean anything. Cannabis will naturally, there are some cultivars that are naturally going to produce a lot of resin and have very thick, dense buds. So that doesn't always mean that a growth hormone has been used on it. The best thing to do is buy from a dispensary and ask them, do you know where this was grown? I mean, if it's all packaged up and it comes from a commercial grower, 99% chance that everything that's been used on it is listed because of regulations. But if it's just in a big jar or you got it from a farmer, ask them, what chemicals were used, when, and were any hormone growth regulating hormones used?
Well, my sellers at Happy Valley are super chatty. So next time I swing out there, I'm going to be like, hey, can we chat about this?
And because they're reputable, they're going to say no, and you won't find anything there with PGR, I hope. But if you're just buying from an unregulated place, what to look out for is excessive orange or red hairs, not a lot of crystals, bud that feels kind of spongy and is unusually dense, and has a harsh taste when you hit it and doesn't have a good smell. So keep an eye out for that and keep yourself safe and ask your dealer, where was this grown?
You know so much about weed. Boggles my mind. It really boggles my mind. I just smoke the shit.
I love it. I love it so much. And so I just read a lot. I wouldn't say I know a lot. I'm always learning. I'm always looking for new stuff and I'm always learning. And I like it. I want to keep our listeners healthy, man. Don't smoke bad shit. Smoke good shit.
Right.
But I also want to scare our listeners.
we want to scare them now that we've talked about the weed that can get them high. I mean,
now I want to frighten them.
There's mines in Alaska. What do they even mine in Alaska? I thought all like mining was like in Pennsylvania and shit like that. What are you mining for, first of all, in Alaska? Gold?
Yes, copper and gold.
Underground?
Yes, and above ground. So what I'm going to talk about today is called the Kennecott Mine. And
Kennecott?
Kennecott.
Okay.
It's Kennecott. Kennecott. So the Kennecott Mines are in Alaska, and they're not that far from Anchorage. And they were found in 1900 when 2 prospectors were just kind of wandering around the wilds of Alaska because the place is huge.
Alaska's bigger than like half of the continental United States. I don't think people know that.
Is it really?
It is. It's huge.
It's freaking huge.
If you were to put Alaska on top of the continental United States, it would take up almost half of the US. It's bigger than Texas. Way bigger than Texas.
It's bigger than Texas. Well, yeah, if it's bigger than half the country.
They say there's nothing bigger than Texas. They lie because Alaska is bigger than Texas. And all of our Texas listeners, we love you, but Alaska is bigger.
We do love you, Texas listeners. And what's up with Pflugerville?
Pflugerville?
We have a listener in Pflugerville, Texas. PF. Pflugerville. Is it Pflugerville or Pflugerville? I need to know.
Pflugerville. It's probably Pflugerville. PH?
No, PF.
PF?
Yeah.
Yeah, but like Pfizer.
Well, yeah, that's probably
The
true.
P is silent.
The P is silent.
The P is silent.
Is silent in Texas. So let us know, Pflugerville people.
I think the P is silent.
You're probably right. You're probably absolutely right.
Anyway, Alaska.
Alaska, big, huge wilderness. These prospectors are out in a mountain range in August of 1900, and they stopped to graze their horses and just happened to see a huge outcropping of blue-green stone, and it's copper, and it's huge, and they're so excited. And they quickly stake a claim. They form the Chitina Mining and Exploration Company. Chitina is a city that's nearby there. And so they formed the Chitina Mining and Exploration Company with 9 of their friends. So these 11 people are super stoked. They found a ton of copper and hopefully gold too. And they're noticed by a man named Stephen Birch, who is a mining engineer who happened to have a ton of friends back east who are loaded. They hear about this mine and want in. They form a company and they buy out these prospectors. They pay them $275,000 in 1900. And I looked it up. I got a calculator, Chelle, and I looked this up. $275,000 in 1900 is comparable to $8 million today.
Oh, wow.
So they were paid roughly $8 million to give up the claim on this mine, which they did. The Kennecott Copper Corporation was found. They had to build a railroad to get this copper out, right? This place is so hard to get to, Chelle.
I think a lot of Alaska is just so wild that it's hard to get a lot of places.
It took them over 4 years, and it expands almost 200 miles of track. And this track goes over huge, huge chasms. And it also went over a glacier. And glaciers don't stay still. This portion of the track on the glacier had to be built and rebuilt every single day as the glacier would move to adjust for the movement of the glacier so that the ore could come down.
Oh.
Some of the ore, they would float it over 3 miles suspended in the air to get back to the track. So as you can imagine, this was an extremely dangerous environment to build a railroad in. And hundreds of people died. I couldn't even find an accurate number. Just so many people died building this railroad. During the construction, some of these people were even required to dig through avalanches and snow. The weather in this area can go from 50 degrees below zero, negative 45 degrees Celsius, to 90 degrees, which is 32 degrees Celsius in the summer. Not a very hospitable place.
Yeah.
So they built this 200-mile long track and all these people died. And now they have this huge copper mine. And as they start pulling copper out, they realize that they have stumbled upon the largest known copper lode on the planet. They're getting millions of dollars. It cost them $20 million to build the tracks. It cost them $20 million to build the tracks at the time. And adjusted for inflation, that's over $460 million today.
That's a lot.
It is a lot, but there were so many accidents and problems as they were building it. Copper's coming out and it has the highest concentration of copper in the world, and they're making huge profits. Its biggest year of production was 1916, and they pulled out $32 million worth of copper. And again, I adjusted it for today.
Right.
$880 million worth
Holy
of copper.
Crap.
So some towns obviously sprung up around these mines. Kennecott was right near the mine, and that's where all the miners lived. And it was small and kind of disheveled. And then a little bit further away, the town of McCarthy was developed. And that was where the red light district and the bars and where everybody went to spend their money. And they were about 4 miles away from each other. Anchorage, Alaska. A lot of people have heard of Anchorage, Alaska. This mine is about 230 miles east of Anchorage. The area that it's in is part of a national park and preserve, and that park and preserve is the size of West Virginia. So it's kind of out there. It's way out in the middle of nowhere. So a lot of miners lost their lives working in this mine. The conditions weren't very good, but so much money was coming out, nobody cared. By the mid-20s, they could see that almost all the ore was gone, and so people started leaving. And the first section closed in 1929. The biggest mine, called the Mother Lode, closed in 1938. And then the final 3 smaller mines named Erie, Jumbo, and Bonanza, they all closed in September of 1938. So the town of Kennecott was deserted by November of 1938. Complete ghost town. You can still go there today and check it out. However, Kennecott and McCarthy are literal ghost towns. Very few people live there, but it's really, really haunted. People say that as they drive up to see, it's hard to get to, but people say as they drive up the roads that follow these railroad tracks to go see the towns of Kennecott and McCarthy, one of the more common ghost sightings is as they're driving up these roads, people will see tombstones on the side of the road.
Oh.
But when they stop to look at them, they're gone. And it's one of those things that lots of people report it, either particularly going up, when they're going up to the Kennecott Mines, they'll see these tombstones on the side of the road. They'll see quite a few of them continuously as they go up. But anytime they stop or on the way back down, if they stop to look and try to find these tombstones again, they can't find them.
Oh.
People that visit the mine will regularly hear miners yelling for help from down further in the shaft, even though they know there's no one down there. And just like the mine that you spoke about in Pennsylvania, they'll very often see miners dressed in their miner garb walking into the mines as if they're going to work, but no one's there when they go to try and find them.
Oh, wow.
People see orbs in the mines and in the town itself. And at one time in 1990, the state of Alaska was going to build a government housing tract along the trail that went up along this railroad. But during construction of these houses, the workers kept seeing people walk by that weren't there, like dressed in old-timey garb. And they would hear voices of people and children in particular, but no one would be there. And it kept freaking the workers out. So some workers wouldn't stay because the ghost sightings and hearing the ghostly voices got so bad that the workers building these houses just wouldn't stay. And finally, construction workers started seeing the tombstones, and then their tools started disappearing. Like they'd put their hammer in the tool belt and they'd go to grab it again and it would be gone. Or they'd put a saw or something in a toolbox and it wouldn't be there any longer. And these got so bad that they finally couldn't get any construction workers to go work there. They just completely stopped construction, and the state of Alaska decided it was too haunted, it wasn't worth it, and they stopped construction. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So I started looking into this mine, and I'm checking into these stories of hauntings, and I hear about people talking about the ghost miners and the orbs. But as happens sometimes when we start researching, I couldn't really find a ton. It was interesting. I thought it was interesting that people would see tombstones and people would see orbs and the old-timey miners, but I didn't think that was exactly like the scariest story to bring to you. So I was about to give up.
But then you must have found something.
I did. So I was like, this is kind of scary, and it sounds like a really interesting place to visit. It has kind of a cool history, and there's lots of ghosts here. I mean, how many places do you know where the state has stopped construction on something because it's haunted? So that seemed kind of cool, but there just wasn't enough, I didn't think. So I'm kind of poking around, and I'm like, can I find anything about this Kennecott mine?
What can I find?
And then I stumbled onto a true crime.
Ooh.
Yeah. And it involves this exact spot, a gentleman who had a summer cabin in the Kennecott Mountains. And he says that when he committed this massacre of 6 people, wounding 2 others, he says that he was driven crazy by the spirits and the fumes on that mountain, the Kennecott mine, that's so haunted that the state stopped construction there.
Did they ever start construction again later?
Nope, it's still abandoned.
Never ever. So right now it's left how they left it.
It is. It absolutely left how they left it. So here's the true crime that I found.
Okay.
In the early 1980s, a gentleman named Lou Hastings moved to Anchorage, Alaska with his wife. Lou Hastings was born January 1st, 1944, and he was a very shy child. It said his dad was kind of abusive and a big old dick, but Lou grew up to be a very caring and gentle adult who had a little bit of depression, but who was known as being a really nice guy who loved animals. He went into the Air Force and became a computer programmer, and his friends described him as being introverted, someone who was continuously worried about his personal safety. He also thought very highly of himself. He was a computer programmer, and he thought he was the shit. However, his friends were like, yeah, he's kind of just so-so.
Sounds like a typical, I won't even say it. Keep going.
1979, Lou Hastings met a woman named Madeline Stovall, who was a librarian, and they got married, and they honeymooned at the Kennecott Lodge in Alaska near the city of McCarthy. And they loved it so much, they decided to quit their jobs in California and move to Alaska the following
Sounds
spring.
like something we would do.
It really does. You're like, oh, hey, I'm vacationing here and I love it. Let's move here. Yeah, it's happened. They decide to move there. One reason behind it was that Lou had gotten kind of disillusioned with modern life when an oil spill had happened and he had helped to clean some ducks and some wildlife that had gotten covered in oil.
Oh, yeah. That happened a lot up there, unfortunately.
It did. And so what they wanted to do by moving to Alaska was escape to a place that was less civilized, was more wild and more preserved, more, yeah. They wanted to go to the wilderness.
Enjoy nature.
Exactly. He wanted to be an environmentalist. He was huge on nature. So they moved to Alaska. They purchase a home in Anchorage and he starts a business doing like computer repair and computer services. Unfortunately, his computer business starts to take a nosedive and so does his marriage. And they'd bought a summer home, a little cabin out on the Kennecott Mountains. And he starts spending more and more time at this cabin in 1982. And the wife is spending more and more time in Anchorage.
Now, is this cabin close to where the mine was?
Yes, it is.
Gotcha.
It's right on Kennecott, right near this old copper mine. Now, Lou Hastings is, he's making friends. It's a very, very small town. There are 22 people who live in Kennecott, and 23 now because of Lou Hastings. So he's making friends with some of the locals, and February 28th, 1983, Lou Hastings spends the evening at the home of one of his neighbors, a gentleman named Chris Richards, and they're just drinking, hanging out, playing board games, as they kind of did on occasion. The next morning, March 1st, about 8:30 in the morning, Lou shows up at Chris Richards' house, and Chris is like, hey, come on in, I'm making coffee, and he turns his back to Lou Hastings when all of a sudden a gunshot is fired and it shatters his glasses. And then another shot grazes the back of his head. He falls to the ground and Lou Hastings, his friend, comes standing over him and basically tells him, you're already dead.
What?
Don't fight and I'll make it quick.
What?
Chris Richard has the same reaction. He's so confused. He doesn't understand what's going on. And he manages to grab a knife that was on the table and he stabs his friend to try and get him to stop shooting at him. And he manages to stab Hastings in the chest and the thigh. And Richards runs out of the house through the snow. And he manages to get to a small abandoned cabin that wasn't that far away. This is like 10-degree weather. And this guy is like barefoot and in his morning clothes, right? He's probably in pajamas. And so he gets to this cabin and he luckily finds some boots and a parka that had been abandoned there. Chris Richards then heads to another neighbor, Tim and Amy Nash, who are a young couple who had just gotten married the Christmas before. And they had been on honeymoon and had returned to Kennecott just 2 weeks before this. Richards thought that Hastings was on his way to the Nashes, so he got there first and told Tim and Amy what had happened. And they treat his wounds, and everybody's just in shock. They don't understand what's going on. So they decide to warn the other people in the town. It's Tuesday, which is mail day. So they know that a plane is going to be coming in at one of their neighbors, Les and Flo Hegland's house, to deliver the mail, and there would probably be a bunch of people gathered there. So they decide to go there and see if they can get Richard some help, as well as to warn the people that are there.
That's the thing up there. Everybody's so secluded and so far spread out that they did have to deal with issues like the plane only coming once a week.
Right. And they had to deal with issues like people didn't have phones. The
Right.
only way for them to get word to the outside world was at the Hegland's house where the plane is coming, because they had a radio that could go long distances. They couldn't even call their neighbors to let them know that they needed to be safe. They had to go there. And so the Nashes and Chris Richards headed to the Hegland's house to warn everyone. So they thought that possibly Lou Hastings was on the way to the Hegland's. So they decided to head there. Meanwhile, Lou Hastings has followed Richard's trail through the snow and ends up at the Nash's house, but he gets there and there's no one there. So he goes back to his cabin and grabs more weapons, including one with a silencer. And then he heads on a shorter route to the Hegland's. So Hastings gets to the Hegland's house ahead of Richards and the Nashes, kicks in the door, and kills both Les and Flo Hegland's, as well as a woman named Maxine Edwards, who had shown up there to wait for the mail plane, as a lot of people in the town often did. To make sure they were dead, he shoots each of them in the head. And then
why do killers always do that? Why is there always, let me make sure they're dead?
I don't know.
Let's make sure they're more dead.
Exactly. So After shooting them in the head, he then drags them into the bedroom and stacks them on top of each other and leaves the silencer and some of his weapons there. At this same time, the Nashes and Richards are showing up at the airstrip, which is right near the Hegland's house. And on the airstrip, they meet Gary Green, a pilot who had gotten there and was cleaning off his airplane. He heard their story about what had happened and agrees to take them to the nearby town to get Richards some medical help and to let the authorities know what's going on. So Tim says, Amy, get on the plane. She won't. So he runs over to the Heglands to let them know what's going on while Amy finishes loading Richards on the plane with Gary. So as the plane's taking off, Amy sees her husband running back to her. He said that the Heglands were dead when he had gotten to the house and that he had actually seen Lou Hastings standing on the back porch and had fired at him and missed, but that Lou Hastings had returned fire and hit him in the leg. So the Nashes, again, Tim's trying to get his wife to get on the plane. She won't. They think that Lou Hastings has left. And so they're going to stay there and warn the mail plane when it comes in and to warn anyone else who might be coming to get their mail. Green and Richards take off and warn the authorities. Unfortunately, Hastings had followed a trail around and circled around and come back to the airstrip. Out of sight of Tim and Amy Nash, he set up his gun and shot them both from about 200 yards away.
Yeah.
He then walked closer to them, shot them again before finally shooting them each in the head.
Make sure they're dead.
And then buried their bodies in a snowbank to try and hide it.
Oh, shit.
At this same time, right after he buried Tim and Amy Nash in the snowbank, a gentleman named Harley King and a woman named Donna Byram are arriving on King's snowmobile. They were neighbors and they were coming to the Hegland's house to meet the mail plane. So as they're driving up, they see large blotches of blood on the snow on the airstrip, and they know that something's not right. And as they get closer to Hastings, as he's standing there, Hastings opens fire on them. King, who was driving the snowmobile, got hit in the leg.
Oh.
He tried to turn the snowmobile and drive away as fast as he could away from Hastings. But unfortunately, because of his broken leg, he lost control of the machine and it flipped, putting him and Donna Byram both in the snow, with Hastings covering ground quickly towards them. Donna tried her best to drag King up back onto the snowmobile, but he couldn't help himself. He couldn't move, and he was too big for her to get on the snowmobile, and he insisted that she save herself. She didn't want to, but Hastings was getting closer and starting to fire at them, so she jumped on the snowmobile and took off towards the Hegland's house. Behind her, she heard Hastings come up to Harley King and basically say, "Don't move, you're dead." She heard 2 shots, and that was it.
How crazy. Literally.
He then started firing towards her and hit her in the arm. She made it to the Hegland's house and got off the snowmobile and hid in some, I believe they were greenhouses, with Lou Hastings hot on her heels. He started looking for her, and she could hear him chanting, "One not dead, one not dead."
Like hunting her, almost like hunting her?
Like hunting her, trying to find her before he finally took off.
Holy crap. Sounds like he was hunting her almost like you'd hunt an animal.
Yeah. So he then gets on the snowmobile and takes off. He was heading west on McCarthy Road, where he ran into the troopers that Gary Green had radioed for. He told them that he was Chris Richards and that Lou Hastings had gone crazy and was killing people. The troopers, however, knew that Chris Richards was already in Glen Allen, the city where Gary Green had flown him for medical attention, and that this man who was telling them that he was Chris Richards fit the description of Lou Hastings, the known shooter. So they then arrested him with no incident. After this rampage, at first, the news articles I read said that they had no idea what had caused this rampage. There was no leads until he confessed. He had a very inflated sense of himself, and he had had a whole plan. He had killed 6 people: Maxine Edwards, Flo Hegland, Les Hegland, Harley King, Amy Nash, and Tim Nash. And he had wounded 2, Donna Byram and Christopher Richards. The reason he said that he did this was because of the oil pipeline. He had planned for almost a year, the whole 8 months that he had been living on the Kennecott Mountain. he had planned to destroy the pipeline. And what he was going to do was go to the Hegelin's house, kill everyone there. And then when the mail plane landed, he was going to kill the pilot, hijack the plane, then fly the plane 80 miles to where the pipeline was, kill everyone there, leave the plane as a diversion or possibly blow it up on the road so that no one could come help, and then drive a truck into the pipeline, which would then blow up, killing him. And he thought that because it was so cold, the oil would kind of congeal and so it wouldn't cause an ecological disaster. So in his mind, that was okay. He was going to save the pristine Alaskan wilderness by blowing up the pipeline and spilling all this oil. And because of the manner of death, no one would know that he was a murderer who then committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. A psychiatrist said that he had a personality disorder and that he considered himself to be an extremely exceptional person. And they felt that he would not have killed himself because he had too high of an opinion of himself.
Oh.
Lou Hastings was tried in 1984 for 6 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. And he was sentenced in July of that year to 6 99-year terms and 2 20-year terms, a total of 634 years without chance of parole. He claimed that he was temporarily insane due to the inhalation of the copper on Kennecott Mountain. And possibly,
yeah, but that can happen. So who's to say maybe he did go temporarily insane from the fumes?
Maybe he did. Maybe the ghosts of the mountain got to him. I don't know. Maybe he had some issues, but regardless, people said that he was a little odd, but no one expected this. It was completely, I mean, the guy, he was playing board games with Chris Rogers the night before, came over the next morning for coffee like he often did, and then just started shooting. That's creepy.
Like totally unprovoked almost.
Completely unprovoked. We all want the environment to be saved. We all want good things, but wow, that seems to be like a pretty extreme way to go about it.
And so no one was ever able to figure out the true reason why.
He had a lot of writings. They're pretty sure the true reason why was he did have this grandiose plan to blow up the Alaskan oil pipeline and to save the pristine Alaskan wilderness. And they're pretty sure that is exactly why he did it. And he just decided in his mind that in order to do that, he had to kill all these people.
You know, unfortunately, when you have people who are mentally unstable to begin with, that are very passionate about a particular cause, they can go a little overboard.
And their reasoning isn't always going to make sense.
Right.
We're not always going to understand why. Sure, saving the environment is a great cause. This isn't a very sane way to go about doing it. And certainly killing that many people, particularly people who have become your friends, is outside of any rational thought. I don't understand. And I think that's part of it is, like you said, when someone starts to have issues, whether from copper or ghosts or already long held mental issues, we are not always going to know the reasons why they commit these crimes.
There's not always going to be a rational explanation.
Exactly. So I started out looking for ghosts and I found a mass murderer.
Wow.
So there you go. I did a little bit of both for you, Chelle. A haunted tunnel that you can go to now and see orbs and ghost miners and hear miners yelling for help. And in Kennecott and the McCarthy towns, you can still see, ladies of the night walking down the street and catch lots of orb photos and all those good ghosty things if you want to go visit. But just be a little bit careful because, there's also the potential to run into the spirits of people who lost their lives to a shitty murderer. Still alive, by the way, still serving his 634-year term.
What, is he in like a Alaskan state penitentiary type thing or?
Yes, he's currently being held at the Spring Creek Correctional Facility in Seward, Alaska.
That was 40 years ago.
That was 40 years ago. Long time.
He'll never get paroled or nothing?
No chance of parole. All sentences were to be served consecutively. So that's why the 634 years with 0 chance of parole. Yeah, that's not someone that you want out. I mean, someone that would just up and decide they need to murder everyone in a town. That's, scary.
All for the environment.
Pretty creepy. So I'm going to hit some more of my Gelato 41.
And I'm going to scare the shit out of you.
I would like that. I would like that a lot because that's all shitty. And I hate the things that people do to each other. The shitty things we do. Ugh.
Well, I love a good ghosty story.
Me too,
And
me
this
too.
one, this is a good one. And I came into this story. There's a couple movies based around this story. So I came in with some foreknowledge that I thought, I know what this is about. No, talk about how people come up and make stuff up over a couple hundred years. So we're going to talk about the Bell Witch in the Bell Witch Cave.
Yay.
In Adams, Tennessee. The two movies I'm referencing that were loosely, we'll say loosely, revolving around this story is one, as you had mentioned earlier, Blair Witch Project.
I love the Blair Witch.
Parts of the Blair Witch Project were pulled from this lore. Not all of it, but part of it was. And then another movie that was a little more kind of solely based around this story was called An American Haunting. I don't know if you remember that movie. I want to say it was like
I don't think I ever saw that one.
the early 2000s that movie came out. I remember it had what do you call it? Not Kiefer Sutherland, his dad, Donald Sutherland. He actually played Mr. Bell. But anyway, so that movie was a little more specifically related around this tale, and Blair Witch Project pulled from some of the story. So we've all seen one or both of those movies. We kind of get the idea of what the Blair Witch Cave is.
Some of us have seen the Blair Witch more than a few times.
And still the Blair Witch Project still gives me motion sickness.
Yeah. And looking back at it, I watched it with my kids not too long ago. And, it doesn't really stand up that well. It's not as scary now as it was at the time. One of my kids was like, why is this scary? I was like, because the hype around it was so much fun. I knew it was fake, but I'd found this website and I found all this other stuff. And
they had missing person posters out for months.
They did. They did a lot of things in the real world to kind of tie into this movie. And it was the first one that I had seen that had done anything like that. And it was just fantastic. And it really fed into the whole scary frenzy of it. And I love that about it.
Yeah. They made it to seem like it was a real thing and not a movie. Like the marketing behind that, excellent.
Oh, yeah. Way ahead of their time.
Yeah. So the Bell Witch Cave, like I said, we're talking like the Tennessee, Kentucky border. And I don't know how I always get wrapped up into these stories that are from like the 1820s, but we're going to take it back to the 1820s.
It seems like that was a ripe time for hauntings in America.
The 1800s was like ghost central, it seems. So it's like 1820. Now, right from the get-go, I was finding conflicting stories. And you know how I get annoyed when I find conflicting stories?
Oh, yeah.
One legend says that there was this woman named Kate Bates, and she essentially is the Bell Witch. The long and short of it is. But she was supposedly, in one version, the girlfriend of John Bell.
Okay.
And then during their engagement, suddenly, for no particular reason, broke off the engagement. John Bell broke off the engagement and immediately married someone named Lucy.
Whoa. So they're engaged. Everything seems fine. And then he abruptly...
No reason.
Abruptly breaks up with her and marries Lucy?
Yep. That's one version.
The cad.
And then has like 4 or 5 kids with Lucy. So then another version is that John and Lucy were one big happy family and that Kate Bates was their disgruntled neighbor who was a witch. So version 1, she's the adorned girlfriend who gets her heart broken. And then version 2, she's the crazy witch neighbor.
Knowing the way a lot of this folklore goes, version 1's probably closer to the truth.
Right.
He's the asshole and she gets blamed for it.
And as we all know, especially back in those times, you didn't like somebody, you accused them of being a witch.
Yeah. Especially if it's a woman that was your fiance and now you want out of the picture. Easiest way?
She's a witch. I think I've had boyfriends do that too.
Only in this case, it's true.
It's true. Some call her the neighbor that was a witch and was shady. Like you said, I actually tend to believe the brokenhearted ex-fiance story myself. So Lucy and John, their first child out of multiple children's name was Betsy, which will be important in a few minutes.
Okay. Little Betsy Bell.
Also, kind of depending on the version of the story, depends on kind of what similar direction you're going to go in. So if you go on the girlfriend story, it is said that she wouldn't leave him alone. She was, why you marry her? We were supposed to get married. What the hell? All crazy.
She needs answers. She's got a lot of questions. I mean, this is abrupt.
You got to figure early 1800s in rural Tennessee, small town, everybody knows each other. So she's all like beating on his door, why y'all sleeping with her? What happened to me last week?
It's not like she can quietly stalk his Facebook and Instagram,
right?
Or get, or find somebody else on Tinder in a heartbeat.
So she goes and beats down the door.
Yeah.
So
So
if we're still on the girlfriend story, the theory goes he locks her in the basement and slowly tortures her and starves her to death in his basement.
Whoa, this escalated.
Yeah, it did.
I can understand being annoyed. I've been the annoying ex-girlfriend. Why won't you come back? Oh my God. Calling, being there, showing up at their dorm room. Okay. I've been that person.
Yeah, but they never locked you in the basement. Never locked you in the basement.
I've seen the annoying ex-girlfriend. I've been the annoying ex-girlfriend. You don't lock them in a basement. I mean, there have been some that I've kind of wanted to, but on the whole.
On the girlfriend version of the story, locks her in the basement and tortures and starves her to death. And then her spirit haunts him.
Well, no shit.
Here's the thing.
He brought that on himself.
The Bell Witch never haunted Lucy.
Well, good, because it's probably not Lucy's fault, honestly. It's probably shithead Mr. Bell's fault.
The Bell Witch haunted John Bell, Mr. Bell, and Betsy, the first child.
Oh, why Betsy? Oh, that's not fair.
Because she was the child that Kate Bates was never going to have with Mr. Bell.
Okay, Kate, I was with ya till the kid.
Yeah.
Fuck with Mr. Bell, John Bell, all you want, but leave Betsy alone. It's
to the point where she tortured Betsy until Betsy's death.
Oh, Kate.
Kind of ruined her life.
Yeah.
Now, this cave was said to be on John Bell's property. So it's a part of his property. But initially, when he was dating Kate and engaged, it was like either I couldn't decipher through what I was reading if it was a place that was just a common land that she would go to all the time, or if it was something that her family owned that his family took over from her family.
Gotcha. So it might have been something that he stole from her.
Right.
Along with her pride.
Yeah, and her heart and, all that.
Yeah.
And apparently her need for food.
Her life.
Yeah. So that was like the only place that she was said to feel at home because she spent a lot of time in that cave as a child. So it kind of, when she died in his basement,
she went to her safe place.
That was like her home base. Yeah. But she would go and torture the Bells for years. Now, nobody really believed it. And they thought it was a bunch of shit and that they were all crazy until finally John Bell died because he was mysteriously poisoned. And then everybody believed it was the spirit of the witch Kate who poisoned him.
It was probably Lucy because he was probably sleeping with some other chick and Lucy had had enough of his shit.
Right. And
but then it's easy enough to blame it on poor Kate.
Because she's already dead and
a ghost. And she's torturing your daughter. And I'm sorry, when somebody starts fucking with your kids, all bets are off.
Another version of the story is they were neighbors. Kate and John were neighbors and hated each other so much. And that she was a witch that cursed him and his property and took over his cave as a way to kind of take over his property with her spirit.
I see. So like the pissed off neighbor who decides to, in death, I'm going to take over this part of your land anyway.
Right. So they kind of made it, she was more like the neighbor that he hated.
Mhm.
But right after, like I said, Belle died under suspicious circumstances, and they said that he was poisoned by her spirit because her spirit was haunting the farm. So obviously she must have poisoned him.
Yeah, somebody shows up poisoned, must be the ghost. That would be my first thought too.
I mean, what can you say?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
You actually can go to the cave.
Ooh, the Bell Cave.
Yeah. And you, for like $20, you can go and actually, I think it's like 80 feet deep or something. It's not a super deep cave. But what I don't understand is somehow the translation went to this brokenhearted girl to now all of a sudden she's a witch.
Right, right.
Like if you're a pissed off female in the 1800s, you're apparently a witch. Just
yeah,
saying.
anytime a woman stepped out of her place, whether she had excessive emotions or whether she was too smart, too outspoken, they had to denigrate her in some way. And witch was an easy
She's
one.
a witch.
She's a witch.
Now we just call them bitches.
Yeah, but even that term we're taking back. Take that.
Another twist to the story, like I said, so many different quote unquote origins. Another is that John Bell became the deacon of the Red River Baptist Church, and that after he became the deacon, the family began to experience paranormal activity all over their property, because I guess they owned probably 10 or so acres of a farm property, and they would see strange animals roaming the property.
Ooh, like cryptids?
Like cryptids, not the normal animals. Like we're not talking goats and cows and whatever. They would describe them as strange animals roaming the property. They would hear knocking sounds on the doors and the walls late at night, chains being dragged through the house, choking sounds. So these are some of the things that they were hearing, even though they didn't really have a reason to believe anything about her, because again, we're just calling her a witch, but that doesn't mean she was practicing magic.
Right. That was just what she was called at the time.
Right. So over time, the unidentified presence in Belle's house developed a voice and would actually speak. It would actually turn into different identities, and like the Ouija board. Who am I talking to? You're talking.
And never trust what a Ouija board tells you when you ask who's calling.
The spirit one time, when asked, said, "Call me Kate, the Bell Witch."
Okay. And so, that one identity seemed to stick above all others?
I guess. And then that spirit, who on occasion called itself Kate, took credit for Belle's death.
Oh, okay.
So the ghost admitted to it.
So they admitted to killing him, called themselves Kate. So the people tied it back to this Kate, the old neighbor.
Right.
Okay.
Or depending on what you want, but depending on the other story, scorned lover, ex-girlfriend.
Okay.
So we've got this poor girl. We've got this sad story of heartbreak. She kills gets her revenge. Let's fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
So you got this cave. This cave does weird stuff. There was two gentlemen who decided they wanted to go into this cave. One of them was I can't remember the word for it, but they're like a cave person, like a caveologist. I don't remember the word, but you know what I'm talking about, like a scientific cavey guy.
Sure.
And the other guy was a photographer. So they were going to go and do this story about the cave. You do actually have the option, or at least you did back in the 80s, because these two gentlemen went in. They were actually doing a story for the a newspaper in Tennessee called the Tennessean. So they were doing an article on this cave for the Tennessean, and this is I think it was 1986.
Okay.
So at least at that point, I don't know about today, but you could spend the night there even.
Ooh, in the cave?
In the cave.
Oh, wow.
So these guys decided we're going to go spend the night in the cave, and they want to go, see about the legend of Kate Bates, who is the Bell Witch. Ironically enough, they never ended up spending the night. Instead, they were frightened away by something that they weren't even sure what it was that frightened them away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So they're too scared to even stay overnight.
Now, apparently, it is a kind of a small looking hole in a cliff near the Red River in Adams, Tennessee. And they had actually tour guide type people take them to the mouth of the cave. And the two guys were these two brothers who lived on the farm where the Bell Witch Cave is located. So, like the property owner type people, not necessarily tour guide people, but the property owner.
So that was probably John Bell's farm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So there's two brothers who live on that farm that were doing these tours basically in the 80s. I'm not sure if they were descendants or not. So these two guys, the photographer and the scientific journalist guy, they were given permission to spend the night. And the brothers told them, we don't think you should. They said they'd never spend the night in the cave. And in fact, they would never go to the cave alone. And these are like grown men.
So
These
they
aren't
knew
like-
what was up. They knew that the place was spooky and had problems.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're doing
tours.
Yeah, yeah. So these two guys, undaunted, they're like, yeah, this is supposed to contain the spirit of the infamous Bell Witch and, a ghost accused of haunting and then eventually murdering John Bell. So they're like, yeah, whatever. This lady from 1820 who haunted and killed this guy, not pretty scary. So there's like a metal gate at kind of the mouth of the cave entrance. So they walk through this metal gate. They thought it was basically like a grunge hole. And that's actually their exact words on how they described it, was a grunge hole. This is where I would freak out. It isn't once they got in the cave, it wasn't the witches that they needed to be afraid of. You know what else is in this cave besides the freaking Bell Witch?
Bats?
Brown recluse spiders.
Ooh, okay. Tuck your pants into your socks, people.
So they point a flashlight on one of the walls, and the whole wall was covered with frickin' brown recluse spiders.
Maybe that's how John Bell got poisoned.
Including one the size of $50 hanging in the middle of the web.
Whoa, scary. Okay.
They described it as there were so many they couldn't count them.
We should put an arachnophobia warning on this episode.
Yeah, right? So, my mind went exactly where yours did. My first thought is, sucker got bit by a spider, because who even knows if they knew what a brown recluse was in 1820?
Right. He goes to the cave
on his property,
on his own property,
yep.
And then gets bit, gets sick, and he's like, yeah, it's that bitch Kate. I went to her cave again and now I'm sick. And then he drops over dead and they're like, oh, it's Kate's fault.
Right. We
think we solved it, Chelle. We solved the crime. It's a cold case no longer.
I know, right? So I agree. I think that he got bit by a spider. But anyway, these two guys are still in here looking around, a little creeped out.
As one would. That's a lot of spiders. I don't mind spiders, and that's a lot of poisonous spiders.
Well, spiders are one thing. Spiders that can kill me, different ball game, folks.
Yeah, why? I wouldn't sleep there. That's not safe.
Well, in the end, they decided not to sleep there. And their quote unquote excuse was the spiders.
Well, that's a good excuse.
Dude, I'm with you, man. I'm totally with you. I don't want to die by a little freaking spider. Anyway, they described the cave as like two rooms, so to say. Like, you go into the cave and there's a wide opening, a quote unquote room. And then there's like another passageway and then another wide opening that's kind of a quote unquote room. It says that the cave is really only about 50 to 55 yards deep. So we're not talking a big, huge cave here. So they get in there. These guys get in there. They hear their first noise. First noise wasn't very loud. And it came kind of deeper in the cave, like from the direction of like the second room. Both of these guys hear it. And it sounds like a raspy, deep, like an unwavering groan, or a big electric buzzer with a weak battery.
Oh.
Sound lasted about 5 full seconds. And with the sound came several loud thumps, and they were sounds that were difficult to make in solid rock. So they weren't things that could have been natural sounds. Now, the one guy whose name was Bill, he is a member of the National I can't even say this, Speleological Society. And this guy has explored miles and miles of caves of all shapes and sizes all throughout Tennessee and Alabama. So this guy, Bill, he's comfortable in caves. He knows what they sound like. He knows what they feel like. He knows about caves. And he said this was not a cave noise.
Interesting.
I mean, I don't want to elevate Bill to the level of calling him a cave expert, but he sure as hell knows more about caves than, say, the average guy. And he knew that this was not a natural cave noise. Then after that, they started hearing a growl.
Oh, no, that's where I'd be done.
Right. And it sounded like it was coming from like just around the bend kind of thing.
Even worse.
Yeah. And the thing is that these guys, I don't want to call them professionals, so to say, but like I said, the one guy's like a cave expert and the other guy's like a world-renowned journalistic photographer. So, I mean, that's not just like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure by any means.
They knew what they were doing.
Right. But they weren't necessarily there to ghost hunt per se.
Right.
So they kind of make their way to the front of the cave. They're getting a little, then they decide, because there's like a line of lights in this cave, obviously for the tourism effect. So they go out to the mouth of the cave and they decide that the two brothers there, the owners that are running the tours, they figure they got to have this cave rigged somehow with like loudspeakers or like, you know what I mean?
It's a logical assumption. That would be a good first step to go look for.
So they go outside the cave and they find what they think is a power line into the cave.
Well, there would be, because you said there were lights run, right?
Right. So they decide to trace it. The only thing that line goes to is lights. There's no loudspeakers. Those wires didn't get cut off into some direction that couldn't be traced. I mean, that power line went in, lit the lights, nothing else done. No loudspeakers, no sound system.
The scientist, the explorer, and the researcher in me loves that they checked. I love that they checked.
I love the fact that it dawned on, that's not something that would necessarily dawn on the average Joe. Whereas these guys were like, all right, where's the wires? Right.
And that's cool. You have to check for things like that. The most likely logical thing is usually what causes it. It's not a ghost. It was a gust of wind. It's not a poltergeist. You tripped over a corner of the rug. You need to pay attention to what's in the environment and kind of take out those, be like, okay, well, there wasn't anything I could have tripped over. There's nothing that could have caused a gust of wind. You have to methodically go through those, because that's most likely what it is first. Once you've eliminated those, then you can start to look at other avenues and other possible explanations.
Right. So they were able to basically kind of negate any outside forces creating those noises. They went back into the cave again and they heard a woman's voice scream, and then the cave just started groaning and moaning. Like, that just spooks me out to think of a cave itself groaning and moaning. Gives me the creeps.
So they think it was the cave, and did they think it was Kate groaning and moaning, like her spirit? Or do they think the cave itself?
They described it as the cave itself was moaning and groaning. All I could think about is the rocks breathing. I don't know.
No, you've now taken it to a point where it's way too creepy. Let's kind of back up a little bit.
So actually, these guys get run out by the noises, don't spend the night. And then they went and told all their friends and family and coworkers that they were not able to spend the night because of the brown recluse spiders. No one believed him, by the way, because that's kind of where I think that people kind of sometimes make stuff up to suit their purposes, because I believe that these guys encountered noises and potentially some paranormal activity. I believe that Kate is a scorned spirit, and she probably did haunt Belle. He deserved it.
Deserved it. Absolutely.
no matter which story you follow, either way, in the end, he deserved it.
It was his fault and he directly caused her death.
But I do not believe that she was necessarily a witch. She doesn't always cause harm either, by the way. A little boy, as you can imagine, kids are explorative in the area, younger teenagers.
Oh, yeah, that cave would be first place kids would go.
A boy fell into, I can't remember how they described it, but all I could think of is like almost like a hole where the rocks come together way down, and he had like plunged kind of into this and couldn't really get back out.
Oh, that's terrible.
He was there with a small group of friends, being kids, and he started screaming, help. He started screaming, help me, help me. And out of nowhere, these children said they heard an adult woman's voice say, don't worry, I will help him. And the boy described it as an invisible woman grabbed his arm and yanked him out of that little, whatever you want to call it, hole. And then all the kids corroborated the story, and they said that this partially invisible woman sat them all down and lectured them about how to be safe in the cave, and then disappeared into a pile of smoke.
No fucking way. No way.
She basically saved the boy and then yelled at the kids for fucking around, and was basically
fucking funny.
Gave him a lecture on safety. But all of the children that were there all described her as a see-through woman.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. And so she was helpful in that situation.
Yeah, so it's not that she is like anything.
She's not evil per se. She's just mad at John Bell.
Scorned.
A woman scorned, that's right.
And you know how scorned spirits are. She's probably still scorned at his descendants. I mean, if you are a descendant of John Bell, you're fucked.
This has been a PSA by the Stone Witches Hour.
Exactly. It's not that she's necessarily bad. She targets, and probably, honestly, like other spirits, if you have a personality like Belle, let's just say, you might have a harder time than, let's say, if you don't have a personality like Belle.
Right.
But there are encounters where people have heard the voice. The voice will go from kind of whispers in the cave to a deep, violent voice.
Oh.
Sometimes the voice in the cave will sing hymns, quote scriptures. They said that even once was quoted word for word 2 sermons that were preached at the same time on the same day, 13 miles apart.
Interesting. Wow. That's kind of an interesting haunting.
Of course, there's another group of folk that describe it as an evil spirit. To quote this group, the kind that the Bible talks about. So she also has been known for people who live on the Bell property, even present day, experience bed covers that have been yanked off. Someone was actually laying in bed and got slapped in the face by an invisible hand.
Oh, wow. I wonder if she only punishes people who have been untrue.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, slapping a man in the face, that kind of sounds like that would...
Go stay there. And if your significant other gets slapped or pinched or the covers pulled off of them, you should question where they were last Saturday night. Check out their socials. Really, really close.
But, essentially, there's still spooky stories. There's still, people still hear things and experience things in the cave.
So she's still haunting it. Her energy, that energy is still there.
And people up as most recently as the late 90s have had experiences even in the properties on the Bell property. So it's not just the cave, it's the whole farm, I think. But one article described the cave as her quote unquote headquarters, which I translate that to almost like her home.
It's kind of interesting to me that possibly if they were like neighbors that were rivals and they had this kind of property dispute, now hundreds of years later, it's pretty much her property. So I guess kind of won that land war.
Right. Like I said, it's one of those stories that's hard to tell because it's almost like there's 2 completely different versions of the same story. You know
A
what I
lot
mean?
of these local legends will have multiple origin stories, and there's really no way to kind of pick them apart.
But I do kind of almost believe more the scorned girlfriend over bitchy neighbor.
I mean, that makes a lot more sense. And in that time, what are the odds that a young single woman was a property owner that could have had that type of dispute with a neighboring landowner? It just,
And not to mention, I've had neighbors that I have really disliked. I try not to use the H word a lot, but I've had neighbors that I have not liked. Dude, they're not worth my energy to haunt for all eternity. I got bigger and badder fish to do that with. Not
yeah,
my not my
exactly.
ex neighbors. If
Right,
I'm haunting
right.
you for all eternity, there's some substance to my anger.
If I'm haunting you for all eternity, we were in love and made promises to each other that you then broke for some strange and mysterious reason. And now I'm fucking pissed.
Yeah,
So, yeah, she
yeah.
never got the answer she was looking for, but apparently she got a revenge.
She got her revenge, and she is at that cave is her home, it seems.
I like the story where she saved the kid. That's pretty cool.
She's not all bad, but I think like what you said, she might sense people who have similar personality traits to John Bell, and those are the people she's messing with.
Or like you said, maybe they're people who are somehow related to John Bell, and she's
Yeah.
just
Oh
kind
yeah.
of just fucking with people who happen to be like the second cousin 8 times removed of John Bell.
You know, I'm gonna curse you and all your descendants kind of
Right.
deal.
For all eternity. Yeah.
Right,
Your
right.
typical curse. Yeah.
Your scorned lover.
Yeah,
Duh.
exactly. Somebody needs to get down on their knees and beg their ancestors for forgiveness or, to try and solve this. And it just hasn't happened.
But I also don't necessarily believe that a ghost can poison you. So I'm totally with the whole John got bit by a spider.
Yeah, either John got bit by a spider and he happened to be talking about Kate, so they blamed it on her, or Lucy poisoned him and was like, I'm not going to jail over this asshole. Kate did it.
Bitch probably put a spider in his bed one night.
There you go. That would do it. Well, it would take more than one brown recluse spider. I mean, most of the time, honestly, Stoned Witches PSA, most brown recluse bites, yes, go immediately to the hospital, but it's probably not going to kill you. It's just going to make you really sick and wish you were dead, but they're pretty nasty. And honestly, if you find a whole wall of them, I'm pretty sure more than one bite could be very, very deadly. So
Run.
yeah, run. So putting one brown recluse in his bed would just kind of that would be pretty spiteful and mean, but probably wouldn't kill him.
But I just get so baffled at how there can be, and this isn't the first time I've found multiple versions of the same story. Very interesting because you can tell based on the time period. It's kind of like the Salem witch trials. God forbid that you're going to admit to your wife that you had an affair. No, you're going to say they're a witch and try to kill them.
Yeah.
It was just kind of the way of the time was just accuse people of shit when things didn't go your way. When you got called out for being a liar and a cheat, you just ruined someone's life to make it easier for yourself. Fucked up.
And they would immediately point at someone with less power than them. And,
Right.
and who
Usually
has less
women.
power, but women. Yeah. And then a lot of times older women or people who were homeless or who had mental disorders. So they immediately go to the person who has less agency, less power.
Or women who had a minuscule of power and property. We had to immediately
that was
take
threatening.
that away.
That was
We had to
very
take
threatening.
that away. Yep, they were very threatening. We have to get them out of the picture. So I think that's a lot of what happened here. I'm not saying the cave ain't haunted. I'd love to go there, to be honest with you, and hear the cave breathe for myself, minus the spiders.
Right.
But I think that it just might be a scorned lover, not necessarily some evil doer neighbor witch lady, but a scorned lover who, you broke my heart, man. I'm going to ruin you for eternity and everyone you've ever loved and are related to. Just like in Practical Magic.
Right. Yes.
just like Practical Magic.
It's interesting to me that the Bell Witch kind of became part of the Blair Witch legend because I don't really see a lot of correlation there other than like a witch who lived in the woods.
I think that's really kind of, the witchy cavey.
Yeah,
thing.
something like that. But I want to go. I want to go and take some pictures. I want to hear the ghost and see if she comes around. But do you think we could go from Tennessee and then fly up to Alaska and then take some orb photos up at the Kennecott copper mine up at the Kennecott copper mine so that I can get my Orby photos in with some ghosties up there and see if we can see some long dead miners walking to work and then do one. It'd be kind of a long trip, Tennessee to Alaska.
But Tennessee would be so much fun because down in Tennessee, there's also a lot of like gem mines.
Ooh.
I'll have to look a little deeper into it, but you can't have a mine without having a story.
That's true. It seems like they all have some sort
Can't have a mine without a story of a ghost.
So true. So true.
Mines and ghosts kind of go hand in hand, and caves and ghosts hand in hand. It's a thing.
Oh, yeah. It seems to be. You know, as soon as we look at them, they look kind of creepy.
Right?
Do you know where you're going next week, Chelle, with your stories?
No, not yet.
Yeah, me either.
I'm too high to kind of pin that down yet. We want to surprise everybody, not only our listeners, but ourselves.
Ourselves as well. I think we should be due for a listener stories episode coming up soon, aren't we?
Ooh, yeah.
So if you've got any personal ghost stories, any times a ghost or ghoul has talked to you or had something creepy and paranormal happen, tell us about it. Email us, thestonedwitcheshour@gmail.com, or send us a private message on our Instagram, The Stoned Witches Hour.
Because we want to hear your stories, because when we do these listener stories, first of all, we have a blast. Second of all, you guys got some great stories. Truly, you do.
You do. There's always so much fun, and they always creep us out so good.
And you know, some of our listener stories, I just get so jealous because I want to live in the towns these people live in and have access to all this ghouly, ghosty stuff like at my fingertips like these guys do.
I will not be surprised, Chelle, when you tell me that you and your love have purchased a haunted house on the outskirts of Salem. I know it's going to happen. Right? If anyone's destined to live, should be in your yearbook, most likely to live in a haunted house. That's you. Right? I'm pretty sure it's going to happen.
You know what I've lived in before? Side note here, because you said that. I've lived in an old church, a converted church before. Let me tell you, more haunted than you'd think. People don't think that old churches are haunted. You remember that apartment?
I do.
We could hear the organ playing from the old church organ.
I was pretty sure I saw a dude walking down the hall when no one else was in the building.
Because he was walking up for his sacrament. Because if you remember where my apartment was where the altar would have been at the front. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person who saw the priest walking around in that building, the ghost of the priest walking around in that building. And there were more than that. That place was creepy. Nice. It was really interesting. But yeah, that's where you lived when I met you.
But one day I will have my haunted Salem house.
Yes, you will. And it will be a fun, glorious day. And we will do a wonderful episode from there. But yes, if you have any hauntings that you want to tell us about, email us. If you have any places that you want us to research or look into.
So yeah, we want your stories. We want to hear what you got. Give us a little spook. It's time. It's your turn. Give us a little spook. We'll shout you out. We'll read your story, and hopefully you'll give us a little scary scare.
Yeah. So I'll let you know when that'll be. Probably on the next episode. I'll let you know when the date of our book 3 of your stories comes out. So send them on in, and maybe we'll read your story on air.
Until then, folks, stay high, stay witchy. Get ghouly, and send us all of your experiences with your ghosts, your invisible friends, your disgruntled lovers who've cursed you. We want to hear about it. We want it all. Bring it on.
Send them all in.
Yeah, the stonedwitcheshour@gmail.com. We hope you have a great week and stay witchy.
Thanks for listening to the Stoned Witches Hour with Chelle and Laylla. Join us next week at 4:20 a.m. when we tell you more spooky stories. Join us next week at 4:20 a.m. on Wednesday for Ganja and Ghouls. All right. That's it.
We
done.
Get so high at the end. It's hard at the end because we're too high.
I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I have lost my train of thought.
I'm just high enough right now that this chips and salsa is the most delightful thing I've had all day.
I want chips and salsa. I'm going to have to go
good.
get some.